Okay, we are back. So, briefest of recaps. Descartes thinks ethics is about being happy, living your best life. He says that we have some ability to control how happy we are by using our minds to modify our initial bodily emotional reaction, which he calls a passion. And I've bragged so much on philosophy. I say, oh, look how useful philosophy is. We're going to help you. It's self-therapy. You don't need to pay the doctors anymore. It'll help you feel great. Now, that's true. I mean that. But you're not wrong if you say, well, at this point, buddy, you haven't showed us how to be happy. You've just promised it. And you're right. Haven't showed you yet how to be happy. That's what's coming up now on page 3. Remember, just like a doctor in philosophy, if you want to heal, you have to know what you're healing. The only way the doctor can fix your broken bone is that she knows what bones are made of. She knows what white blood cells are made of. She's analyzed all this abstract knowledge about biology, and then she can apply it to heal your broken bone. Philosophy is the same way. You have to collect some sort of general abstract ideas about what emotions in general are. They're passive, not active. All this stuff. If you want to use that knowledge to heal yourself, to heal some of your unhappiness. Okay? So we need to go through the big, tough ideas so that we have real knowledge that we can apply to healing ourselves. I don't make you do that stuff just because, any more than doctors go to medical school just because. It's because you need that knowledge if you really want to help people later on. Well, here's where the rubber meets the road. Here are 5 things that Descartes says. If you remember these things in time of unhappiness, you will feel better. And if you think about them often enough, really understand them and really believe them, you will be prepared in the future so that when bad things happen to you, it doesn't bother you quite as much as it could. So remember, these are going to be some general philosophical truths that he then says, remember and think about them in time of need, and you will feel better as a result. But the point is, you will have to try to use them at some point to test out whether they actually help or not. Okay. So, I guess what I'll do first is I'll go through these and I'll just say what the general philosophy principle is. And then I will show you how he thinks you can apply it. So the first one is he says, there is a God and God is good. Remember, these are things that he has proven in the meditations, by the way. If you can make that connection from today to what we read in the meditations, that is really quite awesome. If not, though, just know that they are in fact connected. He's not just pulling this stuff out of thin air. Second, he says the soul is immortal. That is, the mind can live on after the body dies, and it's independent or different from the body. So you're not just the meat and electricity of your muscles and brain and skeleton. You're a mind and a soul which will live on after that body dies. Third one, it's a big old world out there. It's a giant universe. There's currently, 7 billion people on the planet. There's, depending on whether they count Pluto or not, there's around 9 planets in the solar system, right? There's a bunch of solar systems within our galaxy. Anyways, it's a very large universe. Science and philosophy have talked about that for years. Okay. Again, these are just the abstract facts. I'm naming them all first before we apply them because I want you to see how something that seems so abstract and useless, something that seems like it's either true or it's false, but doesn't affect your life, can then be applied in your life in ways to make you happier. So I'm listing them just in the abstract way first to sort of, deliberately shock you when we show how they can be applied. Okay. Fourth point, it's a bit like the third, but instead of you being in the universe, which is very large, it's about you being within a community of other human beings. Okay? The fifth point is that when our body sees something that it's scared of, it very often overreacts and thinks that the thing is more scary than it is in fact, or thinks that the thing is more harmful than it is in fact. And the flip side of that is that when you see something which appears good, you often sort of exaggerate how good it is. Let's put it this way. If you see a snake, if you're like me, you flip out, you jump, and you scream. But almost no snakes are poisonous, right? Let's put it this way. Do you know anyone who's ever died of a snake bite? Probably not. Have you jumped most every time you've ever seen a snake? Probably. Same thing. When the dog sees the dinner food, doesn't it flip out and overreact? Yes. Food is in fact good for the dog. It's not wrong, but it's exaggerating. It's easy to exaggerate how good things are. It's easy to exaggerate how bad things are. Okay, just normal big philosophy ideas, big claims. So what? What's the point? This is what Descartes says. It says each one of these, and there's more, these are just the 5 most basic ones. Each one of these true ideas, if you remind yourself of it and think of it in a certain way when you are suffering, it will alleviate or reduce your suffering. The first one is this: there is a God who exists and who is good. Descartes argued that this is true in the Meditations. And he says, okay, when something seems bad or sad to you, remember that somehow God is behind it, because God is all-powerful and all-good. So there's not just random bad stuff happening in his world that he has no idea about. So when something sad happens to you, remind yourself that it somehow comes from, it's sent to you by God. You won't necessarily know why he did it or why it's good, but if it comes from God, it must somehow be good. So think about it this way. It can be applied in a way like this. When your parents die, which I'm sorry, but it's going to happen. When your parents die, of course you're going to be sad. And you should be sad. But if you remember that somehow God was behind that, and that there's some good reason behind it, while you will still be sad, it will modify or reduce your sadness to a more manageable level where you can still be sad, but you will be calm and not driven to, absolute frenzy by your loss. So once more, do you see how it works? He used geometry basically to prove that God exists in the Meditations. Here he's saying if you use that idea in a certain way in your life, you can prevent some unhappiness. It doesn't mean that you don't care about your parents. It doesn't mean all your sadness goes away forever. It just means that you're more calm, is the word used here, calm in your sadness. Instead of being purely passive, where the sadness controls you entirely and dominates you, if you remember an idea like this, if you use your philosophy, then you can still be sad and show your love for your parents by being sad, but you will not be ruined by it. Your sadness will be more active. That is, you will be in control of your sadness to a greater extent. Okay. Second one, he says, remember that you have an immortal soul. That means you don't have to fear death. This one's pretty straightforward. Anytime you're really scared about dying or you're anxious, you can remember, hey, when I die, I'm not really going to die. Related to that, he says your mind or your soul is independent from your body. That means, for instance, when you're sick or you're tired, you can remember, okay, it's not me who's tired, because the real me is my mind, not my body. It's just this tool or machine of my body which is tired. Now, you'll still feel tired, but you will remind yourself that it's not the core essence of who you are, which is sick or tired or has a sore, sprained ankle. It's just some small part of you that's actually separate from the real you, which is your mind. Okay. Third one, I sort of like this one. It's pretty cool. He says, remember how large the universe is. Let's say you're stressed out about a test. You say, oh, the test is only 1 week away. I'm very stressed out. I'm very scared. I'm going to do poorly. What Descartes says, he says, just remember how big the universe is. There is a whole planet, Mars, that will be completely unaffected if you do badly on the test. There are whole other galaxies where who knows what's going on. There might be life there. There might be beautiful mountains made of glass, crystal, I don't know. And those things are completely unaffected. So even though doing badly on your test is bad, it's not good, is it going to destroy the whole universe? No. Is it going to have any effect on all these other things? No. So what he says here is, he says literally, remembering how big the universe is will remind you that you are not the literal center of the universe or cosmos. What happens to you matters, but it is not the be-all, end-all of the entire universe. So basically, this lets you put things in perspective. Right? And once more, I want you to see, he's not saying, give up, it doesn't matter if you do badly or not. He's saying, doing badly on your test would be a bad thing, but it's such a small bad thing. The badness of it is so tiny if you think about the entire universe. Once more, this is supposed to reduce your anxiety about the test. It's supposed to reduce your sadness if you do badly on the test. And do you see how that could really make you feel better? I bet a lot of you students have many opportunities, right? For this, because you get very anxious about your tests. You get very sad when you get a 89.5 instead of a 90.1%. Just put it in perspective. Okay. Fourth point, it's a lot like the third, but instead of it just being about the universe, it's more specifically about that you're in a community of other people. Okay? His point here is also slightly different. He says, you can't live alone. You don't live alone. You live in a larger community of people. Now, what's more important? The interest and the overall well-being of the whole community, or just the interest and well-being of you? Well, obviously it's the whole community. His point here is that sometimes bad things will happen to you, but sometimes they need to happen to you, a small bad thing happening to you for a big benefit to the whole. It's like taxes, right? I don't want to pay my taxes, but I mind paying my taxes less. That is, I'm happier or less unhappy about paying my taxes when I remember all the good things that our whole community gets out of them. I don't like paying taxes, but my taxes go to cops to protect people. I don't like paying taxes, but they go to libraries where kids get to learn, people who are poor can still have access to entertainment, etc. Okay, that's pretty awesome. So again, what he's saying is, if someone makes you angry, if you feel like you're being harmed by those around you, you can reduce your unhappiness about that by remembering, hey, sometimes I have to pay a little so the whole community can benefit a lot. Okay. And here's the fifth one. This is the last main one we're going to do. Okay? He says, remember this sort of physiological fact that our eyes get too big when we're ordering dinner, everything looks great, and then we order it and eat too much. And our fear is almost always an overreaction. So your desire to get away from things is usually an exaggeration. Snakes are not as evil as they appear. And your desire to get close to things that you want to consume is usually exaggerated. You get the thing and it's not... The quote is that it's not so great in possession as it was in anticipation. Meaning, when you actually get the thing, It's good, but it's not as good as you thought it was when you chased after it so hard. Okay? So the application here is this, is when you are scared of something, remind yourself, it's probably bad if it seems bad, but it's probably not as bad as it appears. And that will calm you. You still know it's bad. You still get to try to avoid it, but you will not be so worried, that is, unhappy with worry, and yet you still get to avoid it to the same extent. Same thing, if you're bummed out because you want something, oh, if only I could date this person, oh, if only I would have gotten this promotion, oh, these things are so great and it's not fair, I can't have them. Then you remind yourself of this great image that your philosophy professor gave you, that when you want these things and you're so bummed out when you don't get them, that you're actually sort of like your dog. You're freaking out because you think the dinner food's going to be so good. And guess what? It's the same decent dry kibble you had before. So remind yourself that you can still want to be with this person. Of course you can. And you can still want to get this promotion. But don't be so bummed out if you don't get them, because just like a dog, you almost always think things seem better. The grass is always greener. And then when you get it, you realize, oh, that's what I was breaking my back to achieve. So this will let you be sort of like the Big Lebowski, right? You'll say, well, the rug really tied the room together, but whatever, it's gone now. You'll be more laid back, take it or leave it with things. Or, to be more exact, you'll be less unhappy when you lose out on things you wanted, and you'll be less worried about bad things happening to you. You'll be happier overall. Okay. That's that. One more discussion question, and then we will move to Princess Elisabeth. Also, how cool is it that we're gonna read about a princess in philosophy class? Okay. The question is this. I just gave you 5 things from Descartes. He says they are abstract, metaphysical, philosophical truths that, far from being only abstract, can in fact be applied to your own life to make you less unhappy, basically. The question is this. Do you think this will work? With any of the 5 examples we just gave, do you think that you could actually use those to reduce the amount of suffering and unhappiness in your life, to increase the amount of tranquility, calm, happiness, contentment? Okay? Do you think those 5 techniques are tools that you could use in your own life to still keep your emotions, but to improve them, basically? Like a doctor, the doctor doesn't get rid of your body. They improve and heal your body. Do you think those 5 techniques are things that you could use in your life to actually heal and improve yourself, to become more active and less passive, more in control of your emotions? Okay, so that's the question. Do you think with those 5 techniques you could become more in control of your emotions? Please pause the recording now and let me know what you think in discussion. Okay, so that's the core of Descartes' ethics. And I just want to point out, how do I say this? There's sort of 2 kinds of ethics, basically. There's the kind of ethics where you want to learn what's right and wrong so you avoid doing wrong to other people. That's very important. But part of what philosophy can do is it can show you the other side of ethics, which is, how do I change and improve who I am? What parts of myself should I develop and work on in order to just become, full stop, a better person? Not necessarily just towards others, but something like this. How can I have more self-control over my emotions, reduce my anxiety, be happier? That's pretty important too. And tons of philosophy focuses on that. If you want more examples, just shoot me an email. Okay? Now we're going to move on to the second part of our reading. This is Princess Elisabeth of Bohemia. Remember I said, oh, Passions of the Soul is such a cool name for a book? Well, Princess of Bohemia is a pretty cool title as well. So now we're going to pivot to that other reading right now, okay? So remember, I just asked you the discussion question of, do you think that Descartes' techniques can help you deal with bad things in your life to become more tranquil and calm, less unhappy, therefore more happy? Well, with Elisabeth, we've got a really good test case because she knew Descartes. They wrote letters back and forth together. And they wrote letters back and forth together specifically about her unhappy life. They covered lots of other topics, but what we're focused on today is that this is someone who actually was alive, who really talked with one of these philosophers, and who said to him, you say that philosophy can make me happier. Prove it. I mean, she said it more nicely than that. They were friends, but she said, okay, friend, you want to help me. I want to be helped. Let's work on my very difficult emotional life and see if you can make me happier. So, long story short is it seems to work, but for complicated reasons, Elisabeth is a little bit skeptical. She's a little bit doubtful that Descartes' method works as well as she needs it to, or as well as she wants it to. So it gets complicated at the end, but we'll say this. Elisabeth gets offered help by Descartes, and she believes that his advice or his remedies, basically what we just went over, she believes that they are useful and will work. But she's doubtful that these particular remedies are going to work perfectly for her in her unique situation. So I know that might seem, well, that's too complicated, it's too 50-50, because I'm basically saying she likes his ideas and thinks they work, but doesn't think they work well enough for her specific situation. But let's get into the reading. So this is a complicated time in European history. We won't go over a great number of the details, but basically she was the daughter of a king in monarchy sort of turmoil. She's now no longer the daughter of a king. She's just the daughter of some guy. Fred, we'll call him, because he's Frederick V of Bohemia. So can you imagine how crushing that would be? How sad that would be? You're basically on top of the world. You're raised with this great education. You're going to be this awesome princess who's going to marry some awesome prince. And then all of a sudden your family has to flee. People are, now you don't have any money. You're living as like a beggar in other monarchs' houses. And you never know if your political enemies are going to come and try to kill off your family. Pretty stressful times, right? Okay. So, like I said, we've got a very tough test case here. Her life, in terms of sadness and disappointments, is about as extreme as you could imagine. She's almost, not only is she almost like a war refugee, but her life was so good and so high beforehand that the fall is so much more harsh or dramatic. Okay. So, maybe if there's difficulty in applying Descartes' rules to her life and difficulty in making her happier, it might be partly because her life was really very, very difficult. Not necessarily that philosophy can't help, but that it can only do so much when her life is so very difficult. Okay. There's just something I want to point out now. I think it's really important and really interesting historically. So, you all read Descartes' Meditations in Philosophy 100, right? Lots of people read Descartes' Meditations in Intro to Philosophy. or in some other philosophy class. You're welcome, by the way, because now you've read this great thing that you could talk to lots and lots of people about it. But, okay, people have been reading and talking about Descartes' meditation since it was written in about 1640. Okay. What is that? That's almost 400 years of people continually talking about Descartes' meditations. Well, the funny thing is, it's only in the last few decades that people really started talking much about Elisabeth. So she wrote letters with Descartes. And back then in philosophy, letter writing was sort of, it's like going on tour for a musician. It's how you practice and polish your ideas and how you expose them to a wider audience. So when they're writing letters, Elisabeth and Descartes, it's not like you might send your parents a postcard when you're on vacation. It's really two philosophers working out their ideas, giving them a sort of dry run, and then maybe later on going on to publish the perfect version of it, which would be like a studio album. Okay. Now, the thing is, every historian of philosophy has known for a while that letters were like this in this time period in philosophy, that they were basically like rough drafts of your work, or you could also say that they were sort of co-written through letters. Other people helped you work out your ideas in letters. That's all normal history of philosophy stuff. But somehow, Elisabeth never got credit for helping Descartes work out his ideas. We had the letters, but she didn't get credit. This is part of what is being worked out in the third paragraph on the first page. The author Shapiro of this, what we're reading, is saying, look, the way most people read Elisabeth is they think that she's just sort of a student of Descartes, that she's learning from him. But what the author of this piece points out, Shapiro points out, ooh, look at the details. Elisabeth is actually teaching Descartes something about his own philosophy. She's schooling him on certain problems with his own philosophy. So there's so much here that's interesting. In a word, I will just say feminism, right? It's probably not a coincidence that this female correspondent of Descartes, Princess Elisabeth, gets less credit for her contributions until recently. Probably the bunch of old white guys, right, who were reading and writing philosophy, they couldn't see themselves in a princess, and so they ignored her almost. That's a shame, but that's probably part of what's happening. Another thing is I want to say to you, my students, this is really how philosophy is done. I don't come to you with everything all worked out in my head. I learn about it as I explain it to you. Your questions back to me make me rethink things I thought I had all figured out. This is really how science, philosophy, art, everything works. We do this stuff together. And in the same way Descartes needed his younger friend, Elisabeth, to help polish and perfect his ideas, I need you all, my usually younger than me friends, in philosophy, through our class, to help me polish my best ideas. I'm not blowing smoke here. That's really true. You all help me sharpen my ideas, and I want to take this moment to formally thank you for helping me develop my ideas. The point specifically of this reading is we're going to look at how Elisabeth helps Descartes polish some of his ideas. Or you could put it more strongly, that she finds some problems in his philosophy and really says, hey, this doesn't make as much sense as you think. You've got to fix it or figure it out. Okay, so we'll stop the recording right here, break them up into chunks, and then we'll really get into what Princess Elisabeth says to Descartes when we start the next recording. Okay, I will talk to you in one moment.